to Complexity Made Simple. My name is Paul Allen, and before we get into today's video, just a reminder, some great news: the design of experiments for 21st century engineers, the Minitab version, has just been released. I know for those of you unfortunate enough to have selected Minitab, you have a great deal of difficulty in understanding this software, so we've created this special version of this text with the Minitab screenshots. The link to lulu.com where you can buy this book is in the description below. And of course, you also have the option of purchasing Drink Tea and Read the Paper, which is the perfect book to go with your green belt or Six Sigma black belt training. The link to lulu.com for that book is also in the description below. And of course, the other thing that we'd really love you to do, please go to buymeacoffee.com and make a small donation. All of these things, the purchase of the books and the donations, they help keep the channel moving. I'm really grateful to all of those people who are currently donating. Many thanks for your support and your help. And now let's get on with today's video. Welcome to the latest video, and in this video newsletter, well, we're going to make a video in answer to someone's comment from a client of mine who's asking for help to analyze a DOE, and he has a sample size problem. So we're going to take a look. Now we've talked about this before, sample sizes in DOE. Now really, I'm going to say something about sample sizes generally, which I've said time and time again. I cannot repeat this often enough. Pretty much sample sizes cannot be avoided. So if you want to interrogate your system, if you have an unknown performance, you are going to have to get 30 to 50 data points, and that cannot be avoided if you have an unknown system. The only way you can escape that is if you make some kind of prediction or you use some other tools. But usually when you're interrogating a system, you have an unknown performance, 30 to 50, it's a given. You can't avoid it. It's a law of mathematics that I can't work you around. So the first thing I'm going to say to you, Peter, I know this is bad news, but that's always got to be the case when you're doing a DOE. You need to get 30 to 50 data points. Okay, so now I'm going to try and give you some advice to sort of, we're going to try and corrupt the situation a little bit, but as I said to you in my email, this is not particularly professionally scientific what we're about to do. We are about to take an engineer's risk, which is a slightly different thing to being professionally scientific and creating a paper, new knowledge, and letting people review it and critique it. If people critique what we're doing here, they're gonna say it's not very professional. Okay, so 30 to 50 data points, that's the first thing. That's what you should have done. Now what Peter's done is he's run a box banking design. He's run a box banking design. It's a welding process. One of the things that he was interested in was the heat affected zone, I think it's impact and strength. So there's a number of things that he's interested, but he's done the box banking, and I think I think it's 4 factors, 4 inputs, but I'm not absolutely certain. Let me just check. 1, 2, 3 actually. No, so I'm wrong, it's 3. So he's done a 3-factor box Benken. $15 runs is what he's done. Okay, now then. He didn't do 30 to 50 on the sample size. What he's done is he's taken 1 sample at each of the 15 runs. So if we take a look at the computer, and here is the computer screen, look. Here's his DOE. So you can see the 3 factors that he's got: current, electrode angle, travel speed. Okay, so there's the 3 inputs, and then you can see some of the output data. Because he's got those green ticks at the top, what that's telling us is that he's done the analysis on those 3 columns of data. But you can see that all he's done is 1 data point at each of the columns, of 1 data point for each of the setups, and he's just got 1 column of data there, 1 replicate, as we would say in DOE language. Now, following the analysis, and I'm just going to look at one of his models, he's analysed those columns, those 3 columns. Now this one is for impact. Okay, so here's the regression analysis that he's done, and what I'm interested in is the p-value column. Now, by the way, you can't see the r squared off the bottom, but the r squared was 80%. So in that sense, 80% of the movement in the numbers was because Peter moved the 3 inputs. Now that's good, that's a good value to get. But don't forget, in order for terms to be valid in this model, the p-value must go below 0.05. So it's got to go below 0.05. Now the closest he gets to that is this one here, look, 0.06. He's got one here, which is 0.08. That's an interaction. So the biggest effect there is an interaction. So this potentially is quite a complicated situation. You've got electrode angle and the current interaction. The current squared, actually, it's a quadratic term, so we put current times current to kind of denote that. So those 2 terms probably would be significant if you got the sample size up. This one here might go significant as well. It's difficult to know. I'm guessing a little bit here. But the problem he's got is, although he's got a model, he's got a great r squared, because that's really good. He's got no significant terms in the model. And that's because the sample size is too small. So that's what happens when you try to avoid the sample size. So I've talked about this before. I've had a client do this before, where they cut the sample size down and didn't see any signals in what they thought was going to be a very successful experiment. Now, some of the other models are similar. In some of the other models, he does have 1 or 2 significant terms, but there are other terms that maybe would go significant. All right, so we have a problem. So what would be the real answer to this? Well, the real answer is to duplicate up the sample size. So multiply this by 2 and get you at least 30 data points. I've got to be frank, I would prefer him to do it by 3 and get 45 data points. At 45 data points, anything that's going to be significant is going to show up. So okay, what's a workaround? What's a very kind of, oh, it's a very dirty way of doing it. Well, a way to do it is this. take one of your columns of data. We will call it the heat affected zone for now. And I know that one of the numbers in the heat affected zone, I think the first one was 077, all right, for the first run. What I'm going to suggest you do is you artificially duplicate the column, and you go change the number, decide how much you want to reduce it by, 074, and you create an artificial additional data point. Now what you could do to balance that out is to give you a second artificial data point where you go, I've gone 3 points down, so now go 3 points up, which would be to 080. So what that does is it keeps the average in exactly the same place, so the model should come out to be identical potentially. The model will be identical, but the p-values will become significant. So what you'll do by doing that is you'll change the p-values. Now this is unfortunate. I mean, one of the things that could be also part of your problem, Peter, is the high and low values that you chose. One of the things you should try and do is for your high and low values on your inputs, your input high and low values, to be as wide as possible. Now what does this do? Well, it negates the sample size problem because you're making the signals bigger. If the signals are bigger, the maths is happier. So that's another thing you could have done. I mean, if I look at your, let me just look at what you did. Your current was 100 to 140. I'm guessing that's amps. So as a high and low, you went 100 to 140 on the current. You went 50 to 90. That was the 50 to 90 on the electrode angle. And the travel speed was 3 to 4. Now, to be fair, these look quite good. I mean, this one could be a little bit wider maybe, but actually, if this is meters per minute or meters per second, you're going up by 33%. It's a big change. So, you know, your design space looks really good. Your problem is your sample size. What would I do? I'd artificially create a second and a third data point, and then I'd rerun the model. And what you'll find is anything that was going to be significant will be significant. It's corrupting the data. If I was in a manufacturing company, would I try this? Yes, because we're not trying to publish knowledge. If I was trying to pass a degree course, would I do this? No, because the paper is going to come under professional scrutiny and you will be criticized for doing this. But in an engineering company, what would I do? I'd falsify the data. I would then go to the optimizer in Minitab, and I would ask the optimizer to hit the targets. Now in some cases, I think you're trying to minimize some, but maximize others. You've told me what it is you're trying to do. I will leave you to investigate the optimizer yourself. I think that's better for you to do it. Let's just have a quick look on the software, and I'll just show you where it is on the menu. So on the DOE menu, Stat, DOE, Response Surface, because that's where you are, and right at the bottom, look, it says Response Optimizer. And then you have a chance to say for each one, minimize, maximize, or hit a target. So I can't remember exactly what you wanted, but I think you want to maximize the has zone. So you're trying to minimize that whilst trying to maximize the others, I think was what you were trying to do. So you can just pop that in there like that, and then you can ask the computer to try and hit those three values, and the computer of course will come up with a suggestion for how best to achieve that. I think by the look of this you've already had a look at your optimal design. If I go up, let's have a look. No, it doesn't look as if that's worked. But if you go to there's response optimization. So you've gone to response optimization for two of the three outputs. But you know, the trouble with what you're doing potentially is that this model might not work because you don't have enough data. However, you've got the optimization values. What would I do now? Having gone to the optimizer, so I've added data. I will remove insignificant terms to get a correct model. Then I'm going to use the optimizer to try and hit the target. Then I go back to the machine, I produce the pieces based on my optimized values, and if I hit the targets that were predicted, so if I hit the predicted value, the predicted value, the predicted value, despite the fact that I didn't have the sample size, my model is working. Now that might be a justifiable reason to say that's why I left the terms in the model. But it's a risk. But you know, you could try it. You've got the data, optimize, add some new data so that you can get the p-values down, get a better model. So remove the insignificant terms, because the insignificant terms, the one with a very high p-value, they will knock your prediction model off target. So remove the insignificant terms, get a nice short model that now has good p-values, then get an optimized setup, go and put the optimized setup into your machine, see if you hit the target, and if you do, hey, you've got a model that works. That's the important thing. As an engineer, I care about a model that works. I'm not trying to be scientifically perfect, but if I'm advising people who are doing PhDs, degrees, they're writing dissertations and papers that are going to be published and that have got to be marked, you've got to be doing it based on proper scientific principles. So Peter, I hope I've given you some ideas. I hope maybe you can do this because you're trying to answer an engineering problem and not pass a degree. Hopefully you've got a solution that works. If not, please come back to me. And by the way, if anybody's got a question, I'm more than happy to try and help, more than happy to make a video for you. So I hope to hear from you all soon.